All right, welcome in, everybody. It's the Important Nonsense Podcast. 32 teams in 32 days. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning, Duval, Jacksonville today. How's it going, gentlemen? Ready to talk some swamp?
Could we go back in time and just talk about Gardner Minshew? Those shows were so much more fun.
That's right. We had a Jack Knows Best recently where he was making some backhanded comments about Gardner Minshew, and I said, "Don't you dare talk about."
Oh, so he's fired? I didn't realize we had fired Jack. Oh, wow!
Driving his RV in his cutoff jean shorts, like that man, he can do whatever he wants in this league.
I'm not gonna lie. There was times whenever I wanted the Steelers to have just traded for Gardner Minshew instead of signing Mitch Trubisky.
I would take Gardner Minshew over anybody you have in your room.
Yeah.
Oh, well, too late now.
Well, we're not the GM.
Hindsight.
Hindsight?
Yeah,
they changed sponsors. You can't do that joke anymore.
Not Heinz. Yes. So Jacksonville, Duval, 32 and 32. We are recording on 7/30, July 30th. So if anything seems out of date, that would be why. Also, 12-team PPR, as always. So again, if any of the projections, numbers, or anything seem off, that would be why. So adjust accordingly. Patreon.com/important nonsense. Sign up, join the Discord, ask us questions. $3 tier, get our rankings. $5 tier, get the projections and the stat book. And $3 also gets you access to all the betting. So shout out to those guys, Mason and Vishal, both top 5 in every category possible on Betting Pros last year. So well worth your investment to come over to Important Nonsense. And then, of course, if you're enjoying these videos, like and subscribe, and the Patreon, you get 2 days early access to this information. And I know you used that on this episode specifically because you have been craving your Jacksonville Jaguars information. So let's not delay it any further. Let's get right into it. At the top, we have the flowing mane of Trevor Lawrence. And is there really anything to discuss about Trevor Lawrence other than he's like top-end super flex with upside?
Yeah,
I mean,
that pretty much sums it up. He's in
pretty much it, right?
He's in that tier 5 we talked about during the Bears show.
Yeah.
He's in that tier 5 at quarterback, which is a little upside corner.
Mm-hmm.
He's right in there with your Trey Lances and your Justin Fields and your Tuas. He's right there for you. We haven't, he had one bad season, although I can't really fault Lawrence for that. I fault Jacksonville for hiring Urban Meyer.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what that is. You notice how now every report coming out of camp is that Doug Peterson runs it like a real team. And I'm like, well, despite the fact that Doug Peterson looks like the living incarnate of Myrtle Beach, he actually does seem to understand how to run a football team. He did it for years with reasonable success. So I'm expecting Trevor Lawrence to look significantly better in a much better offense. And well, that could be debatable, but it's not hard to be a much better offense than what Urban Meyer was cooking up last year.
Yeah.
So he's in little upside corner. If he ends up being your backup quarterback, fabulous. How would you feel if he was your starting quarterback, though? See, that's the scary one.
I don't know if there's a scenario where he is your starting quarterback.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to super punt QB. Right now, he's going at the end of the 11th, top of the 12th.
Yeah, you'd be really punting at that point.
So,
probably too far. So,
there are. So again, the only reason that I phrased it as I did at the beginning is because I have him 19. Neil, you have him 18. Mike, you've got him 17. ADP, he's 18. We're all in line. We all have him in the same area and the same range. So it's not that there's nothing to discuss with Trevor Lawrence about the talent or the upside or that he could do this or that. It's that, I mean, we really feel the same as the general public does right now.
And the ECR.
I would take about 17 or 18 guys ahead of him, and that's about it.
Yeah, as you said, it's not really plausible to have him as your QB1, but at his ranking, there's not very many times whenever he would be an option as your QB1.
Right.
Like you would have other quarterbacks available much earlier that you would have probably drafted at some point.
Yeah, because even just going back to last season, you could have a similar situation to like a Derek Carr, where he's your QB2 that you take around ADP, QB 19 or 20, and he ends the season around 12, 13, 14, and has a couple of top 10 weeks mixed in there. That absolutely could happen. We've also seen with this very Jacksonville Jaguars team, Blake Bortles have a horrendous interception season and still finish top 5 because they were trailing so much and chasing so many points that he was throwing the ball like crazy and just put up massive yards and touchdowns to keep up. And for the first 3 quarters, it was horrible to watch, and he had 5 points, and you felt terrible about your decision. But by the end of the fourth quarter, in garbage time, he had a 26, and you felt great about it. So that's basically what you're hoping for if you draft Trevor Lawrence this season. And I'm okay with it. I have no problem with it. All right, let's move on to running back. Travis Etienne returns from his Liz Frank injury that cost him his entire rookie campaign. Last season, I had Etienne as my number 2 right behind Najee Harris. He was number 1 on some people's rookie boards, and I think he has a legitimate shot to be the rookie of the year this year, which is always weird how that plays out, but whatever, it is what it is. But yeah, Etienne, there was a lot of hype about him going into last season. The only reason that it's even a discussion now is because James Robinson. There was the debate last year between him and James Robinson, who would be the guy. Then all of a sudden, James Robinson gets hurt at the end of last year. And now with Etienne out, it was just going to be James Robinson. He played all last season, and now Etienne comes back. How would they split the workload? But Robinson's not going to be there. Now he's healthy and he is there. So should that change anything? Does ADP get different with Robinson theoretically being healthy? For me, it doesn't change anything, but does it move the needle at all for you guys?
No, not particularly. I mean, we can go through it formally here. Steve, you've got Etienne as RB13. You're actually significantly ahead of the probably the public even, but also you're of the ECR and of Mike. I've got him a couple spots lower than you. I've got him at 15. Mike's got him at 19, and the ECR has also got him at 19. So you're a little more bullish, and I am as well. And the reason for that, from my end at least, is because just look at the roster that's on your screen if you're watching this. I mean, there's not a whole lot of competition here from the wide receiver room, from the tight end room. I think he's going to get featured in this offense, assuming he can stay healthy is going to be the question. But I'm willing to spend up for it because he is an exceptional pass catcher coming out of the backfield, and that is usually what we're looking for since we're playing in PPR. So that's that. He's right on. He gets elevated a little bit for that reason, and then we can talk about James Robinson. James Robinson is interesting because he's trying to return from injury. And Mike, I'll let you talk about that. But James Robinson has proven to be very effective when he's healthy. So are you concerned about that at all, Mike? The James Robinson injury that he picked up at the end of last year?
Yeah, I mean it's an Achilles. Like this hasn't been a sustainable injury to return from and perform well. The year after it happened. It happened late last season.
Yeah.
Which is one thing. And so Cam Akers is the first player that we had, especially running back at least, that we had seen return in such a quick fashion. That's not, as most fantasy analysts that are of the doctors and things along those lines have established, that wasn't normal.
Right.
So even when he came back, he was not very effective. So if you're looking at James Robinson's situation of him returning, I don't like him at all this year. I do think that they're going to split the workload when it comes to the rushing game. Etienne is going to just have a stranglehold of the receiving aspect of the backfield because, as we said, he's a phenomenal receiver. Electric, great route runner, great hands. So Etienne, I might even move him up as I have tinker back and forth between the rankings, which you guys can see whenever we update them, as we update them every single couple days or weeks, because it's going to be ever changing in this offseason. I don't like James Robinson. I am obviously the lowest with him at RB 55, which is below ECR and over 10 spots below either of you two. I just think that I don't like the upside because I don't see much there with Robinson.
Yeah, I think the reason that it didn't move the needle at all for me with the Robinson news is because even before the news I'm referring to, by the way, if you didn't hear it, was that we were all expecting, because of the injury, like Mike had mentioned, that he was going to start on PUP. There was a possibility he would start the season on actual PUP, that he wouldn't be ready to go week 1. Now he's already back. He's at training camp and he's working out and running with the team. So he's already ready to go, and he'll be ready to go for the regular season. I had him already projected for 15 games to play the full season and had him as my RB38 going into all of this. So him coming back early and us knowing that he's going to be okay, I've got him at 36. So for me, it didn't move the needle at all because I had Etienne at 13 knowing James Robinson would be okay. So that's why it didn't do anything for me. But Neil, you've got Robinson at 43. You're slightly more hedged on it.
I'm in line with the ECR, and it's mostly because for me, Robinson is the one you want. If you're looking for, he's the one I from how I think this is going to work, he's going to be the guy who actually gets a lot of the meaningful red zone work, especially if they're going to be running the ball down in close. I think they're going to put Robinson in there to do that more so than the more sleight of frame Etienne. But Etienne will be in there on third down in the red zone when they go into that mode, and he's going to have a ton of work because they're going to be chasing. But Robinson gets the slight edge over where Mike has him for me because I'm sure he's going to play, but that's what I think his job is going to be largely is between the 20s to be the running back, and then when they get in close, when they're actually running and when they get in close, he's gonna do the dirty work there. So I'm willing to be okay with that. But more to the point, I almost view him, given how low he's actually going, I almost view Robinson as the Etienne handcuff.
Yeah.
He's in that range.
Which is kind of how I have it ranked. In ADP right now, Etienne's going at running back 21, and Robinson's going at 38. So he's going in the same area as James Cook, Alexander Madison, Ronald Jones, Nyheim Hines.
I would much rather at least 3 of those guys than Robinson.
And I know you would, I wouldn't. I think that's the difference in the ranking there.
Let me put it to you this way, Mike. If the injury concerns weren't a thing with Robinson coming back off the Achilles, you still have that opinion? Because I think it changes. Yeah. See,
I get his concerns though.
I just want to make it clear to everyone anyone who's listening to this that's why. It's not a talent issue with James Robinson. It's his knee has been reconstructed.
Achilles.
Yeah. Right. His Achilles has been reconstructed. So we don't know what this is going to look like. Is he going to have burst? From my evaluation, I don't care if he really has that much burst. I just need him to battering ram his way into the end zone. And that's kind of, if he can do that, that's kind of what I'm looking for here. So
overall, this was one of the worst red zone offenses last season. So if Peterson can improve that at all, which, again, low bar,
right?
Then Robinson is going to have some success this year because I agree that he will likely be the between the tackles type player. I just think that at their ADPs, Etienne is more of a value to me than Robinson is.
Yep, 100%.
Oh, Etienne is a steal right now.
Right.
It's fabulous.
What is that? So 40. So he's going late 4th round right now. Is when you can get Travis.
Getting those DeAndre Swift vibes from last 100%, year.
100%. Just people with the unknown. But last year, James Robinson in 14 games led the Jags with 164 rush attempts, 8 touchdowns in PPR, finished the year as running back 22. And that's with missing 3 games. So he still finished the year in total points at running back 22. So again, he's got the upside if he were to get the workload because something happened to Etienne again and all of a sudden he becomes the handcuff, the workhorse in this offense. Snoop Connor is an interesting name to know. He was a 5th round draft pick who I evaluated pretty highly. I thought he could, depending on the situation, could land in the right place and have a role as a backup. But when you're on an offense with Etienne and Robinson already established, it's going to be difficult for him to find his way onto the field other than everything going sideways. So, yes, to your point, Mike, coming off of the injury, if something happened to Etienne, it's an extreme possibility that both Robinson and Connor would kind of split that job. And maybe Connor would be more involved in the passing game, at least on third downs, to be able to help Robinson out, not having to take the full workload. But I think there's a definite possibility. We saw just 2 years ago when he had basically the entire job, James Robinson was a top 10 running back.
Mm-hmm.
So for him last year to have essentially the entire job, get hurt, and still finish what would have been top 20 had he played out the whole year, says to me that, yes, he could have a slight downtick, but yeah, I would take the risk on him as opposed to, I don't know, like maybe a Ramondre Stevenson where there's too many questions in another committee situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd still, even in that situation, I'm taking Stevenson there.
Yep, fair enough.
We'll talk about it tomorrow, but I would rather have him over Ronald Jones, who you also mentioned by a little bit. So just because I think Robinson is, even with the Achilles problems, is a superior player. It's just what it is. So, frankly,
look, I think we'll take away from this the one thing we can all agree: Michael Carter is still in that range. Don't want Michael Carter. Wide receiver. Starvin Marvin Jones still out there at the X. You've got Zay Jones, who signed in free agency. You've got Christian Kirk, who signed for way too much money for no apparent reason. They still have Laviska Shenault. They brought back Laquan Treadwell, who somehow was the best receiver they had last season. And when it wasn't Laquan Treadwell, it was somehow Jamal Agnew, who is also back with the team this season. It's a bizarre wide receiver room, to say the very least. But let's start at the top in terms of money. Christian Kirk. Where are we on Christian Kirk this season in the offense? Neil, let's go to you first.
Well, Christian Kirk is, for me, no more than kind of a flex. I've got him at wide receiver 34, and it's largely based on the idea that they're going to have to throw a ton because they're going to be bad. And they're going to be having negative game scripts. They're going to be going hurry up. They're going to be chasing. Similarly to why I'm so high on Etienne. I'd argue that's the one you really want off this entire roster. But if you're looking at wide receivers in the Jacksonville room, Kirk is the one that you're going to have to hold your nose and deal with it. I will point out, I have never been a fan of Christian Kirk's game or talent. So I have no idea what they're doing paying him this contract. But even I have to acknowledge he's going to be the one who gets the first crack. He's going to be the one with the best chance to succeed. And even with that, on an offense that's going to have to throw a ton, that I still can't justify him having him any higher than 34 in my rankings. And he's basically a flex. If he's your wide receiver 3, okay, but you're going to need to have another option more than likely. So that is the most backhanded compliments is what all of that is. I'm not super excited about any of it. I'd like to avoid the whole situation if I can, just to be perfectly honest. But if I have to go that way, I'd be okay with him, but no higher than that. For all you crazy people on the internet that are talking about how he could ascend into some sort of meaningful wide receiver 2 role, holy cow, no. Don't listen to anybody who's trying to sell you that snake oil. That's terrifying. Yep. Mike, what do you think?
I have some positive thoughts about him in general because of, like we said, it's arguably the cheapest wide receiver 1 that you will be able to get in your fantasy drafts of a team's wide receiver 1. So if he sat there, and last year was the first year that he played over 50% of his snaps from the slot, and then it turned out being his best season, which is probably because he's a slot receiver. The problem's going to be there was a handful of wide receivers last year that were over 100 targets on the season and spent over half their snaps from the slot. Obviously, guys like Cooper Kupp, there was guys like Jacoby Myers, another very cheap wide receiver, depth chart number 1. you got Keenan Allen, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. So it's not frequent that a team's number one option on the offense plays most of their snaps from the slot. But if we're seeing an improvement from Trevor Lawrence, then we're going to likely see a good season from Christian Kirk, is basically what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So I am perfectly fine with having Christian Kirk as my wide receiver 3, but ideally he's your flex. Agreed there.
Yeah, I talked about it when the signing actually happened. Essentially, the first couple years of his career, he did absolutely nothing. He was the number 2 on the outside to whoever the number 1 was in Arizona, and it just wasn't working. And things weren't going right, but he thought he deserved to get that opportunity for whatever reason, and he just wasn't good. Then last year, they signed A.J. Green to play on the outside opposite of DeAndre Hopkins. For the first time in his career, a majority of his snaps come in the slot, and he has the best statistical season of his career. Has a breakout year. He was a guy that I was willing to start almost every week as a wide receiver 3. And again, had a solid season, put up decent numbers playing out of the slot. But when his contract expires, he's looking to be an outside and an alpha wide receiver. He gets paid as a top-tier wide receiver to go to Jacksonville. And is he going to act? If he actually stays in the slot where he was last year, I think he'll be fine. But if he's demanding all this money and they want to put him on the outside for some reason, I think it's just not going to work out. The way that Jack has it listed as the slot, I think that's the way it should be. I just hope that's the way that it actually pans out for him, because otherwise it's going to go sideways fast.
Yeah, and that's the question, is if he's going to be the one that mans the slot a majority of the time, because there is 5 players between the wide receivers and tight ends that played over half their snaps from the slot last season.
Yeah.
So there's only so many slots.
Yep.
You can't have, 4 or 5 slots on an offense. That just doesn't work that way. Somebody has to play on the outside.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about too, with the fact that last year Treadwell playing so well, Agnew playing so well, it was volume. Like whoever is in the slot is the one that Trevor Lawrence was the one that was honed in on. So that was the guy who was getting a majority of the attention. If that's Christian Kirk this season, great. I have him projected at 41. I have him ranked at 40. And right now he's going 41 in ADP. So I feel pretty decent about that. Like if I can get Christian Kirk as my 4th or 5th wide receiver, fantastic. I feel like there's a decent amount of upside, still some meat on that bone, that I feel okay about it. Beyond that, though, they also spent money on Zay Jones. They still have Marvin Jones lurking around, who we've always been higher than the general public on, just because he has a solid floor. There's just not a ceiling anymore. So is there anyone else in this wide receiver room that any of you guys are interested in?
In a byline, no.
No?
I mean, if you want the short answer, then no. I do like how Mike had it written here. They have more slot receivers than there are slot positions, because that is the personnel grouping that they have assembled. Marvin Jones would be the one that if I was going to make a case for, it would be him. But I have concerns about him at this point, given his – I mean, Marvin Jones is getting up there. And he's never been exactly the most durable cat on the planet. So I have some concerns about whether or not we're getting close to the Father Time cliff that will eventually claim us all as it relates to Marvin Jones. But I'm really not interested in any of it. Frankly, this is a situation that I would like to avoid. If I can get Christian Kirk as a flex, I'd really prefer he not be my wide receiver 3. But if he can be my flex, fine. Anything else, I'm kind of willing to let other people rummage around in the dumpster here.
Yeah, Jones would beat Marvin Jones, not any Jones. Marvin Jones specifically would be the Jones. Yeah. I would be Jones in 4 if I had to, but I'm not going to waste a draft pick on anybody else on this receiving room.
Yeah. Even then, I'm the only one who really has it ranked that way too. Like it's 69 is the ADP. Again, nice. For Marvin Jones. I've got him at 65. And then the ECR has him at 64. So I'm the only one that has him in that draftable range. You guys have him a little further down the list. However, everything else, my goodness, 87 for Laviska Shenault. They just won't let it die. Like I was a Laviska Shenault truther for one season, and I couldn't hack it anymore. Just couldn't do it. I know he's getting reps as a running back. I know he's getting reps as a punt returner. They're trying to find desperately something for him to do on this team before they ultimately cut him, because that's the path that we're ultimately heading towards.
I'll say to you what you said to me in the Carolina show about Robbie Anderson. I know he's dead to you.
Yes.
He's not dead to everybody yet.
Yeah, it just wide receiver 87 in the ADP right now. And then, boy, Zay Jones, 123. I know you don't like Zay Jones, and I completely understand not liking Zay Jones, but they signed him in free agency. So he's not going to sit on the bench. Whether you like it or not, he's going to be the wide receiver 2 or 3, depending on target share with Marvin Jones in this offense. So he's going to have a role. He's going to have streamable, usable weeks during the buys. So 123, you can get him off waivers for nothing, but just remember, Zay Jones still in the NFL, currently playing for the Jaguars. So there you go. That's
considering his claim to fame is that weird video of him like standing up weirdly, like in reverse, basically. I'll pass. I'll pass.
Fair enough. And again, I always like to throw out there, Laquan Treadwell, Jamal Agnew, both had usable, streamable weeks last season. They were both good. They both had roles in this offense. It's just with the guys ahead of them on the depth chart, they won't have value this season, but it's just worth keeping in mind, because if something were to happen, Marvin Jones, like you said, Neil, is getting old. He's not the picture of health himself. If he were to miss time and Treadwell all of a sudden steps into a starting role, he'll have streamable weeks. Same thing with Agnew. They're going to have value later on. There's a surprising amount of depth on this roster. It's just not all great.
That's part of why I'm willing to kind of let anybody else that wants to, in a draft scenario, rummage around in here.
Yeah.
Because I think that the real answer to how this will finish at the end of the year is probably going to translate more into waiver claims along the way. These are guys I would know their names because they probably should be on the waiver wire for you. And once the dust settles and we start working out a pecking order and the injuries start to happen, then you'll know who you want.
Yeah.
So I'm not really interested in investing draft capital in this. We'll figure it out along the way.
Tight end. Evan Engram joins Dan Arnold in Jacksonville to be part of Doug Peterson's offense that's historically prioritized tight ends. That is factually correct. But yeah, Dan Arnold came in. Remember, James O'Shaughnessy last season had some value before he got hurt. Dan Arnold came in, had some value before he also got hurt, and then things went sideways for them. The rest is history. But right now in ADP, Evan Engram, tight end 20. It's so nice to see Engram outside of the top 10, and we don't have to listen to the hype anymore. Boy, that was getting real old. Although I did see somebody on Twitter point out that Evan Engram this season is now the same age as Travis Kelce when he had his first 1,000-yard season. So I had to block that person immediately.
Right. Good. That's the right response.
I didn't accidentally get any
report
for like blasphemous.
No, for fake news. All the new fake news Twitter rules. Just toss that on there.
I mean, he's not wrong. It's always fun to remember the fact that Evan Engram is like the only case, other than now Kyle Pitts, of a tight end succeeding in their rookie season. And hopefully, unlike Kyle Pitts, Evan Engram hasn't done anything since then. So it's just been false hope and smoke and mirrors. And now he's in a situation where he gets paid to be the tight end. But again, all of a sudden, he's in a situation where there's too many mouths to feed. And of everybody, he's probably the worst skill position guy that they have. And I would say the 5th passing option in this offense.
Yeah.
3 wide receivers and a running back.
Yeah. He's probably 5. He might crack 4. Maybe. That's being nice.
Yeah,
but
I'd say argument for 4.
Yeah.
But not like, a great argument.
I think it's Kirk Etienne, the Joneses, and then Evan Engram.
And that's where it's like maybe it's not both Joneses, it's one of the Joneses,
and
it's something like that. But why are we? I don't want to spend too much time on this. Evan Engram has hands that are literally made of stone.
Like, as we've seen on the Twitter video that was just posted at training camp of him dropping a pass.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation
pass. It was
we've had this conversation a million times. Yeah. He's always near the top of the league in drops every single year. Yeah. This happens, and it's just because he's got stone hands. And it's going to happen at some point during the season, probably early in the season, and probably more than one time. He's going to be wide open in the back of the end zone. It's going to hit him right in the hands, and he's going to drop it. And then he's going to get ushered off to the sideline and invited to have some Gatorade and sit down, while Dan Arnold, who can actually catch, is going to get an opportunity to do something. Like that's what it is. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because I'm having this. We've had this argument every year since 2017 when he broke out, had the one good year. It was his rookie year, 2017. Every year after that, there's always this hope that he might be able to recapture that magic. It's never going to happen again, as far as I'm concerned. And I really am becoming dubious that it would ever happen here in Duval. They're going to give him opportunities. I just don't think he's going to translate into actual production. And that's why I'm more interested in, like, Dan Arnold is really not draftable. But to me, he's the one that I've got my eye on because when Dan Arnold can stay on the field, he actually does catch really well because he's a converted wide receiver, and he showed flashes last year when they had the cupboard was totally bare that Lawrence was looking for him early and often because he had confidence that he would actually be open and catch the ball. I could see that happening again this year, whether Ingram's there or not. So,
well, I think go ahead, Mike.
Ingram's one good season, as we've said, that 2017 was the season that Odell Beckham missed like 75% of the year because of I think it was like a fractured leg. So Engram was it. That was the only aspect on the offense. Yeah, and volume was the only thing that did it for him. Well, okay, he's not getting volume here.
No.
Well, and that's
I don't see a single situation that he gets volume.
2020, 2 years ago, he had 109 targets. And even with the 109 targets, he still finished as tight end 15.
That's so bad.
And he's not going to get anywhere near that this season. Like I said, with the other options that they have on this offense. Last year, he had 73 targets, which I still believe he would be lucky to get to 73 targets, and he finished as tight end 23.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what we're talking about.
Like it shouldn't say Engram on the back of the jersey. It should say Doink.
Like the reason we're talking about him at all is in 2017, like you mentioned, he had the 115 targets. So he had the amount of volume, but he also had 6 touchdowns. So it's getting in the end zone and it's having the opportunity. He's not going to have the opportunity, and this team isn't going to be good enough to get in the end zone. So ultimately, I don't think it'll matter for Evan Engram. All right. Defense and kicker, that wraps it. Have a good one. There's literally nothing to discuss here at all in any way, shape, or form. If you're even considering Jacksonville's defense and kicker, I don't think you understand how it works. Make sure you're signed up.
No, you play in a 32-team league fantasy league. It's a 32-team league. Yeah, that's the only way.
That makes sense. All right. Well, that's going to wrap Duval, boys. Do we have any closing thoughts or no?
I wish they would just bring back Gardner Minshew. Like I said, those
basically
shows are so
avoid it.
Yeah, stay away from the vast majority of it. Etienne, Robinson, sure. Lawrence as a backup level type of quarterback. Christian Kirk is maybe a flex, and frankly, I'm done with the rest of it. Maybe Dan Arnold off waivers in like week 15.
Agreed. Said it simple enough.
Right. Well, we have some actual fantasy relevance to talk about tomorrow because we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. So again, patreon.com/important nonsense, sign up, join the Discord, get the rankings, get everything, get these a couple days early. And until tomorrow, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at importantnonsense.com. Kaboom!